You're going to die having never really lived. And the reason is simple: you've been taking life far too seriously. Right now, you're probably grinding through your days like life is a test you're failing. Every morning is a battle plan. Every interaction is a performance review. Every quiet moment gets filled with anxiety about whether you're doing enough, being enough, becoming enough. You've turned your entire existence into a problem that needs solving. And here's the devastating part: the harder you try to solve it, the worse it gets. You wake up exhausted even after sleeping. You achieve things and feel nothing. You're in a conversation, but you're not really there. You're 3 moves ahead, calculating, managing, controlling. You've forgotten how to just be anywhere without turning it into a project. This isn't depression. This isn't weakness. This is what happens when you treat life like a job you're constantly about to get fired from. Alan Watts saw this trap everywhere in Western culture. We've been taught that life is fundamentally serious business, that we must be vigilant, that relaxation is something you earn after you've sufficiently tortured yourself with productivity, that play is for children and adults do important things. So you live in a permanent crouch, braced, ready, serious, and you wonder why you're miserable. Here's what Watts discovered. Seriousness is a disease. It's not maturity. It's not responsibility. It's a form of violence you're committing against yourself every single day. The moment you decided that life was something to be taken seriously, you created an opponent, yourself. And now you're locked in eternal combat with the one person you can never defeat. Think about it. When was the last time you did something without immediately judging whether you did it right? When did you last have a conversation without performing? When did you last feel something without analyzing whether you should feel it? You've turned everything into work. Even your attempts to relax are work. You're trying to meditate correctly, exercise optimally, eat perfectly, love properly. Even your pleasure has become a task with metrics. This is insanity, but it's the sanity we've all agreed to call normal. Watts spent his life pointing at this cosmic joke. You're so busy trying to get your life right that you're missing the fact that you're alive right now. You're treating this moment, the only moment that actually exists, as an obstacle to some future moment when you'll finally have permission to relax. But that moment never comes, because the moment it arrives, you immediately create a new future to be anxious about. You're on a treadmill, running toward a horizon that moves at exactly your speed. And the truly hilarious part, the thing that would actually free you stopping seeing the absurdity of the game, is the one thing you won't let yourself do, because that wouldn't be serious enough. Let me show you how deep this trap goes. Every single day you wake up and immediately start playing a game. The game is called Get Your Life Together, and the rules are simple. You must constantly improve, constantly progress, constantly become a better version of yourself. Sounds reasonable, right? Sounds like what responsible adults do. But here's what you haven't noticed. You can never win this game. It's designed to be unwinnable. Because the moment you achieve something, the goalposts move. You get the promotion, now you need the next one. You lose the weight, now you need to maintain it perfectly. You find the relationship, now you need to optimize it. You reach the goal, now you need a bigger goal. You think you're climbing a ladder, but you're actually on a wheel. And the exhaustion you feel isn't because you're not trying hard enough. It's because you're trying to win a game that has no victory condition. You're fighting an enemy that regenerates faster than you can strike. Watts called this the backwards law. The idea that trying to improve yourself is what creates the sense that you're broken. The effort to become peaceful is what creates the agitation. The attempt to be spontaneous is what makes you stiff. Think about it. Who's the person trying to improve you? You are. And who's the person who needs improving? Also you. You've split yourself into two. The judge and the judged. The fixer and the broken. And now you're locked in an internal war that can never end. Because even if you fix yourself, who's the one who determines you're fixed? The same judge, who will immediately find new flaws, new problems, new insufficiencies. This is the trap of seriousness. You've made yourself into a project, and projects are never finished. They're either in progress or abandoned. So you live in permanent dissatisfaction, not because your life is wrong, but because you've decided it should be evaluated as right or wrong in the first place. Watch how this plays out. You're at dinner with friends. Are you there? Really there? Or are you performing good friend? You're having sex. Are you lost in it, or are you doing it correctly? hitting the right notes, performing adequately. You've turned intimacy into a skill assessment. You're alone with your thoughts. Are you at peace, or are you immediately productive, filling the space with podcasts, plans, optimization strategies? You've turned existence itself into something that must be justified. This is what it means to take life seriously. You can't just live. You must also constantly judge how well you're living. You can't just be. You must evaluate the quality of your being. And the horror is that you've been doing this for so long, you don't even notice it anymore. The judge runs in the background like malware, constantly scanning for problems, constantly creating new anxieties, constantly denying you the simple experience of being alive without commentary. Watts saw that Western culture had created a peculiar form of torture. We teach people that they are inadequate by nature, and then we sell them solutions to problems they didn't have until we convinced them they were problems. You weren't born anxious about your productivity. Someone taught you that your worth equals your output. You weren't born worried about whether you're living correctly. Someone convinced you that life is a test with a grade. And now you're stuck. Because the part of you that's trying to fix yourself is using the same broken logic that created the problem. You're trying to think your way out of a trap made of thinking. It's like using a hammer to fix a hammer. The tool is the problem. But here's where it gets really strange. The moment I tell you to stop trying so hard, what do? You start trying to not try. You make being spontaneous into a goal. You work at relaxing. You get serious about not being serious. And you've just made the trap deeper. Here's what Watts discovered that breaks everything. Life was never meant to be a problem in the first place. You've spent your entire existence treating life like an equation that needs solving. Like there's a correct answer and you just haven't found it yet. Like somewhere out there is the right combination of achievements, relationships, experiences, and self-improvements that will finally add up to enough. But what if I told you that life isn't a problem at all? What if it's a game, and not a game you're supposed to win, a game you're supposed to play? Your mind just rejected that, didn't it? Because play sounds irresponsible, childish, not serious enough for the important business of being an adult. And that right there is the disease. We've confused seriousness with significance. We think that if we're not suffering, we're not doing it right. That if it doesn't feel like work, it doesn't count. That pleasure must be earned through pain, and joy is something you get only after you've punished yourself sufficiently with discipline. This is insane, but it's the foundational insanity of Western culture. Watts pointed out something the Eastern philosophers knew thousands of years ago. The universe doesn't work the way we think it does. We imagine reality as a collection of separate objects, including ourselves, all competing for resources in a hostile environment. Life as warfare, existence as struggle, you against the world. But that's not what's actually happening. That's a story you've been told, and you've mistaken the story for reality. The truth is far stranger. You're not separate from life. You're not in the universe like a stranger in a foreign country. You are the universe. You're what the whole thing is doing right here, right now. You're not a tourist in existence, you're an expression of it. But your culture has convinced you otherwise. It's taught you that you're a lonely little consciousness trapped inside a bag of skin, and you must fight to survive in a universe that doesn't care about you. So you live in a defensive crouch, always on guard, always trying to control things, always serious, because how can you relax when everything is potentially dangerous? This is why you can't stop. This is why you can't just be, because from this perspective stopping is death, relaxing is failure. Being present without agenda feels like you're wasting precious time. But here's the cosmic joke. The person who's living this way, the serious striving controlling you, isn't even real. Stay with me here. The you that you think you are, the one with the problems, the one who needs improvement, the one who's taking life so seriously, that's a character. A role you've been playing for so long that you've forgotten it's a role. Your real nature, the thing Watts kept pointing at, is something else entirely. It's not the anxious thought stream. It's not the judge. It's not the one trying to get it right. It's the awareness that's watching all of that happen. And that awareness, it's not serious at all. It can't be, because it's not separate from anything. It has nothing to prove, nothing to become, nowhere to get to. It's already complete, already here, already fine. The Taoists had a name for this understanding. Wu Wei, action without forcing, movement without effort. living without the constant internal narrator, judging every moment. It's not passivity, it's not laziness, it's what happens when you stop treating life like a problem and start experiencing it like a dance. Think about dancing. When you're really dancing, you're not thinking about the next move. You're not judging whether you're dancing correctly. You're not performing for an imaginary audience. You're just moving. The music, the movement, and you, all one thing happening. That's what life is supposed to feel like. Not a march, not a mission, not a mountain to climb. A dance, a play, a game with no victory condition because the playing itself is the point. But you can't get there by trying. That's the maddening paradox Watts loved to illuminate. The moment you make spontaneity into a goal, you've killed it. The instant you try to live in the now, you've created a future-oriented project out of the present moment. You can't think your way into this understanding, because thinking is the problem. The constant mental chatter, the judging, the planning, the analyzing, that's the mechanism of seriousness. That's what's keeping you locked in the game. So what do you do? How do you stop taking life seriously without making that into another serious project? You don't. You can't. And that's exactly the point. Let me tell you what actually happens when you start to see through this. It doesn't happen through effort, it happens through exhaustion. One day you're going through the motions, doing all the things you're supposed to do, checking all the boxes, playing the game, and something inside you just stops. Not dramatically, not like some spiritual awakening, more like a machine that's been running too long finally overheating. And in that moment of complete burnout, when you literally cannot try anymore, something strange occurs. Nothing falls apart. You stop striving and the world doesn't end. You stop controlling and chaos doesn't consume you. You stop performing and people don't abandon you. You stop judging yourself and you don't dissolve into worthlessness. In fact, the opposite happens. Things get easier. This is the crack in the illusion. The moment when you accidentally discover that all that effort, all that seriousness, all that control wasn't holding your life together. It was making your life harder. Watts compared it to holding your breath. You think you need to actively control your breathing or you'll die. So you hold it, consciously managing each breath, staying vigilant. But eventually, exhaustion wins. You let go, and your body breathes perfectly on its own. It always could. You were just interfering. Your life is like that. It's already working. You're already alive. Your heart is beating without a 5-year plan. Your cells are regenerating without productivity metrics. Your existence is happening perfectly well without your constant anxious supervision. But you've been taught not to trust this. You've been taught that nature, including your own nature, is fundamentally flawed and needs correction. That if you're not constantly intervening, managing, optimizing, something terrible will happen. So you live in a state of chronic tension, always gripping, always controlling, always serious about maintaining control. And then one day, completely exhausted, you let go, just for a moment, and you realize you are holding on to nothing, fighting nobody, protecting yourself from a danger that never existed. This is what Buddhists call enlightenment, though Watts hated that word because it makes it sound special. It's not special, it's ordinary. It's just seeing what was always true. You made life into a problem, and the problem was never real. The depression you feel, it's not a chemical imbalance that needs medicating. It's a completely rational response to treating your existence as a perpetual crisis. The anxiety you carry, it's not a disorder. It's what happens when you imagine that your survival depends on constantly controlling things that can't be controlled. The emptiness you feel after achieving things, it's not because you picked the wrong goals. It's because you turned life into a series of goals instead of experiencing the living of it. When the illusion cracks, you see that you've been playing a game against yourself, and the only way to win was to stop playing. But here's where it gets tricky. Your mind immediately wants to turn this realization into a new strategy. Okay, so I need to learn to let go. I'll practice non-attachment. I'll work on being present. I'll get serious about not being serious. And you're back in the trap. Different costume, same game. Because the part of you that wants to get this right is the same part that created the problem. The judge is still judging. The controller is still controlling. You've just given it new spiritual language to work with. This is what Watts called spiritual materialism. You take the insights of Eastern philosophy and turn them into Western self-improvement projects. You make meditation into a performance, mindfulness into a metric, enlightenment into an achievement to unlock. You're still taking it seriously. You've just swapped being successful for being spiritual. But the underlying disease, the constant evaluation, the perpetual inadequacy, the war with yourself remains unchanged. So what's the way out? There isn't one. That's the point. There's nothing to do, nowhere to get to, no problem to solve. The moment you truly see that life isn't a problem, the problem dissolves, not because you fixed it, but because you stopped creating it. And this happens not through effort, but through seeing, just seeing. The way you might suddenly see an optical illusion flip. You can't force it, you can't try to see it, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. You see that the person who's been taking life seriously is a fiction, a useful fiction maybe, but a fiction nonetheless. A character you've been playing in a game you invented, and then forgot was a game. And when you see this, really see it, something lightens. Not because you solved anything, but because you stopped being the problem you were trying to solve. Life continues, challenges still happen, pain still arrives, but there's a fundamental shift in how you meet it all. You're no longer fighting reality, you're dancing with it. Here's what nobody tells you about letting go of seriousness. It doesn't make you irresponsible, it makes you effective. When you stop treating every moment as a crisis, you actually start responding to life instead of just reacting to your own anxiety about life. Think about the difference. Right now, when something happens, you're not really dealing with what's happening. You're dealing with your thoughts about what's happening, your judgments, your fears, your stories about what it means and what might happen next. Someone criticizes you at work. What's actually happening? Words were spoken. That's it. But you don't experience it that way. You experience a full-scale emergency. Your worth is being questioned. Your future is threatened. You need to defend yourself, or fix yourself, or prove yourself. You've turned a moment into a catastrophe, and then you wonder why you're exhausted. When you stop being so serious, you start seeing things as they actually are. Words were spoken. Do they contain useful information? Use it? Are they someone else's projection? Let it pass. There's no crisis. There's just what's happening. This is what Watts meant when he talked about spontaneity. Not randomness, not recklessness, but response without the heavy machinery of self-judgment running in the background. You become like water. Water doesn't agonize about the shape of the container it's in. It doesn't judge whether it's flowing correctly. It just flows. And in flowing without resistance, it's the most powerful force on earth. But your mind rebels against this, because you've been taught that if you're not constantly vigilant, constantly serious, constantly in control, you'll fail, you'll be lazy, you'll become nothing. So let me ask you something. When was the last time you did your best work? Really your best? The thing you're most proud of? I'll bet it wasn't during those grinding, serious, disciplined sessions where you were forcing yourself through willpower. It was probably when you forgot yourself, when you got absorbed, when you stopped trying to do it right and just did it. Athletes call it the zone. Artists call it flow. Watts called it wu wei, effortless action. It's what happens when you stop interfering with yourself. Your best moments aren't when you're taking life seriously. They're when you're so absorbed in what's happening that you forget to judge whether you're doing it right. The pianist loses herself in the music. The writer forgets there's a writer. The lover stops performing love and just loves. The player plays. That's your natural state. That lightness, that ease. That's not something you achieve through discipline. It's what's been there all along, underneath all the seriousness. But we've built entire civilizations on the opposite idea. We worship suffering. We praise grinding. We celebrate exhaustion as virtue. Look how hard I'm trying becomes a badge of honor. And anyone who suggests that maybe life doesn't have to be that way gets labeled as naive, irresponsible, not serious enough for the real world. But here's what's actually naive: believing that your anxious control is what's keeping things together. Believing that your constant self-judgment is what's making you better. Believing that if you just try hard enough, you'll finally arrive at a moment when you can relax. That moment never comes, because you keep creating new reasons why you can't relax yet. Once I get the promotion, then I can relax. You get the promotion. Do you relax? No. Now you need to prove you deserved it. Once I find the relationship, then I'll be happy. You find the relationship. Are you happy? No. Now you need to make it work perfectly. Once I have enough money, then I'll feel secure. You get the money. Do you feel secure? No. Now you need to maintain it, grow it, protect it. The goalpost moves because you're not actually pursuing goals. You're running from the feeling that right now, as you are, you're not enough. And that feeling will never go away through achievement, because it's not based on what you have or haven't done. It's based on the fundamental belief that you're supposed to be different than you are. This is the violence of seriousness. It's a constant no to what is, a constant rejection of the present moment in favor of some imaginary better moment in the future. But life only happens now, this moment, this breath, this experience. And if you're always saying no to now because you're busy trying to get somewhere else, you're saying no to life itself. When you stop taking life seriously, you're not giving up. You're finally showing up. You're finally here, experiencing what's actually happening, instead of being lost in your anxious commentary about what's happening. And that's when life stops being a burden and starts being, well, what it always was, a dance, a game, a strange and temporary gift that you're in the middle of experiencing right now. Not later, not after you've earned it, not when you've finally gotten it right. Now. Let me show you something about the weight you've been carrying. It's not real. Every ounce of heaviness you feel, the pressure, the responsibility, the constant burden of being you, it's something you're doing, not something being done to you. Watch how this works. You wake up. Before your feet hit the floor, what happens? Your mind immediately loads the weight, the list, the obligations, the problems, the things you're behind on, the ways you're failing, the future you need to control. None of that is happening. You're just lying in bed, but you've already made the day into an opponent. This is the mechanism of seriousness. You believe that if you don't actively carry all this weight, it won't get handled, that your vigilant worry is what's keeping things from falling apart, that your constant mental grip is what's holding your life together. But here's the devastating truth what's kept pointing at. Most of what you're worrying about isn't even yours to carry. You're carrying other people's expectations, your parents' definition of success, society's metrics of worth, Instagram's version of happiness, your old self's commitments that your current self has outgrown. You're carrying hypothetical disasters, things that might happen, conversations that could go wrong, futures that may never arrive. You're solving problems that don't exist yet, and most of them never will. You're carrying the past, mistakes you made, ways you embarrassed yourself, things you should have done differently, opportunities you missed. You're dragging all of history behind you like chains. And you think this is responsible, adult, serious. But all it is exhausting. The Taoists had this figured out thousands of years ago. They watched nature and noticed something. Nothing in the natural world carries weight like this. Trees don't worry about whether they're growing correctly. Rivers don't agonize over the path they're taking. Birds don't have existential crises about whether they're flying optimally. They just do what they do, effortlessly, because they're not separate from the doing. They're not split into the doer and the judge of the doing. But you've been split. You've got the part of you that lives, and then you've got this other part, the serious part that constantly watches and evaluates and worries about whether you're living correctly. And that second part, that's the weight. That's what's crushing you. It's not life that's heavy, it's your relationship to life. It's the constant commentary, the perpetual judgment, the never-ending evaluation of whether this moment is good enough, whether you're doing enough, whether you're being enough. Watts used to say that we suffer from a bad case of the oughts. You ought to be further along by now. You ought to be more successful. You ought to be happier. You ought to have it figured out. You ought to be different than you are. And every ought is a rejection of what is. Every should is a violence against reality. You're at war, not with your circumstances, with yourself. And in that war, you're both the aggressor and the victim, the judge and the prisoner, the problem and the person who can't solve it. This is insanity, but we've normalized it. We call it having standards or being driven or caring about excellence. We've made self-torture into a virtue. But watch what happens when you drop the weight. Just for a moment, just as an experiment, you're stuck in traffic. Normally you'd be seething. Why? Because you've decided this moment shouldn't be happening. You should be moving. This is wasting your time. This is making you late. This is wrong. But what if you just stopped fighting it? What if you noticed that you're actually just sitting in a car? That's all that's happening. The suffering isn't the traffic. It's your war with the traffic. The moment you stop fighting, something shifts. The traffic is still there, but the suffering evaporates, because the suffering was never the situation. It was your refusal to accept the situation. This is true for almost everything you're struggling with. The struggle isn't the thing, it's your relationship to the thing. Your job isn't making you miserable. Your belief that your job should be something other than it is that's making you miserable. Your body isn't the problem. Your war with your body, your constant judgment of it, your belief that it should be different, that's the problem. Your life isn't overwhelming. Your belief that you should be handling it better, that you should have achieved more by now, that you should be someone other than who you are, that's what's overwhelming you. The weight you're carrying isn't life, it's your constant no to life. And the moment you see this, really see it, the weight doesn't get lighter, it disappears, because you realize you were never carrying anything real. You were wrestling with phantoms, fighting shadows, suffering over your own thoughts about suffering. Watts put it perfectly. Muddy water, let stand, becomes clear. You don't have to do anything. You just have to stop doing the thing that's making it muddy. Stop churning, stop stirring, stop trying to fix the water by splashing around in it more violently. Just stop and watch what naturally settles. Now here's the part that terrifies you. If you stop taking life seriously, who are you? Because right now your entire identity is built on the struggle. You are the person who's trying, who's working on themselves, who's got goals and plans and standards. You're the serious one, the responsible one, the one who cares. Take that away and what's left? This is why you cling to the weight even as it crushes you. Because at least when you're struggling, you know who you are. You have a purpose, a direction, a story about yourself that makes sense. But if you let go, if you stop trying to become someone better, if you just are, that feels like death, like disappearing, like becoming nothing. And you're right, it is a kind of death. The death of the character you've been playing, the serious you, the striving you, the you that's always one achievement away from being acceptable. That you has to die, because that you is a fiction. A persona you constructed to survive in a culture that demands constant performance, and it's killing you from the inside out. But here's what Watts understood that most people miss. When that false self dies, you don't become nothing. You become everything. Stay with me. Right now, you're contracted. You've squeezed yourself into this tight little ball of identity. Your name, your roles, your achievements, your failures, your story about who you are and what you need to become. And you defend this little ball of self with everything you've got, because you think that's all you are. This small, separate, vulnerable thing that needs protecting. But that's the illusion. You're not small. You're not separate. You're not the tiny, anxious character you think you are. You're the entire field of awareness in which that character appears. You're the space in which thoughts happen, not the thoughts themselves. You're the screen on which the movie plays, not the character in the movie. And the screen doesn't need to be protected. It doesn't need to improve. It doesn't need to become anything. It already is everything. This is what freedom actually means. Not the freedom to do whatever you want. That's just another form of control. But freedom from the constant need to be someone. From the exhausting project of maintaining an identity. From the serious business of becoming. When you stop taking yourself so seriously, you realize that the self you were taking seriously doesn't even exist. It's just a pattern, a habit, a story you've been telling for so long you forgot it was a story. And stories can change, characters can be rewritten, the whole play can be seen for what it is, a play. But your mind is screaming right now, isn't it? Because this sounds like spiritual bypassing, like an excuse to be lazy, like permission to stop caring about anything. And that's not what this is at all. When you stop taking life seriously, you don't stop engaging with it. You engage more fully, because you're no longer paralyzed by the fear of getting it wrong. You're no longer performing for an imaginary audience. You're just responding, moving, dancing. The difference is enormous. Right now, you make decisions from fear, from the question, what will keep me safe? What will make me look good? What will get me approval? Every choice is a calculation, a strategy, a defense. But when you're not taking yourself so seriously, you make decisions from clarity, From the question, what actually wants to happen here? You're not strategizing, you're responding to what's alive in the moment. This is what Zen masters mean when they talk about beginner's mind, not ignorance, but the freedom from all your accumulated seriousness about how things should be, the freedom to meet each moment fresh without dragging all your history into it. You're talking to someone. Right now, you're not really listening. You're thinking about what you're going to say next. You're judging whether you're coming across well. You're managing the impression you're making. You've turned the conversation into a performance. But what if you just listened, actually listened, without all the self-conscious commentary running in the background? What if you responded from genuine interest instead of from the need to appear interesting? The conversation becomes real, alive, unpredictable. You say things you didn't plan to say. You laugh at things that aren't strategically funny. You connect in ways you can't control. And that scares you, because it means you're not in control. You're not managing the outcome. You're just there, present, participating in something that's happening instead of directing it. This is what Watts meant when he said life is a dance, not a march. A march is serious. It's got a destination, a purpose, a formation. Everyone in step, moving toward the goal. But a dance has no destination. You don't dance to arrive somewhere. You dance for the dancing itself. The movement is the point. The music is the point. The aliveness is the point. When you stop taking life seriously, you stop marching and start dancing. Not because you've given up on destinations, but because you realize that you're already here, always here. And the only thing you're missing by constantly trying to get somewhere else is the fact that you're here. The freedom you're afraid of isn't the freedom to do nothing. It's the freedom to stop pretending, to stop performing, to stop trying to be someone worthy of life, and just live. Because here's the secret, you already are worthy, not because you earned it, not because you achieved enough, but because you exist, you're here, you're alive. That's it. That's the entire qualification. Everything else is the game you're playing on top of that simple fact. And the moment you see it as a game, you're free to play it lightly, to take it as seriously as you take a game of chess, engaging fully while knowing it's just a game. The pieces matter during the game, but when the game ends, they all go back in the box, and the real you, the awareness watching the game, was never in danger, was never insufficient, was never anything but whole. So now you see it, the game you've been playing, the weight you've been carrying, the war you've been fighting with yourself. And seeing it doesn't mean you'll stop playing immediately. You probably won't. The habits are deep. Tomorrow morning you'll probably wake up and start loading the weight again. Start taking it all seriously again. But something has shifted, because now you know it's a choice. Maybe you're stuck in traffic, and you catch yourself seething, and then you remember, oh, I'm doing this. I'm the one making this into a problem. And just for a moment you stop, and the suffering evaporates. Or maybe you're lying awake at 3 in the morning, grinding through your mental list of everything that's wrong, and suddenly you see it, you're taking this so seriously, like the universe is grading you. And in seeing the ridiculousness of it, something lightens. Watts spent his entire life pointing at this, not teaching it. You can't teach what can only be seen, but pointing, showing, laughing at the magnificent absurdity of beings who think they're separate, asking how to become whole. You already are whole. You always were. The search itself is what creates the sense of incompleteness. So what happens when you stop searching? You find what was never lost.